Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at MEREDA's 2025 Industrial Outlook Panel Discussion. My name is Josh Soley, President of CORE and a member of the Board of Directors of the Maine Real Estate Development Association. I'll be moderating this discussion. With me on stage is Josh Benthian, CEO of Northland Enterprises, and Adam Martin, General Manager of Harvey Performance. You can find our bios by scanning the QR code in the program you picked up during registration. Programs are available at the registration if you need one. Done with that. So we're here to discuss the future of industrial. We're going to discuss how employee retention has changed and how that's affecting the market, how the collapse of cannabis and breweries and construction pricing and all of these factors have changed the way that the bankers in this room underwrite deals and the developers in this room underwrite deals, and we're gonna scope your minds to want to either develop industrial tomorrow or never touch the product again. So without further ado, I want to start this discussion by asking the question everybody in this room would like to know. And I'm going to ask it to Josh as our resident developer. Josh, I want to build a 50,000 square foot industrial building to spec.
Yeah.
Where am I putting it? How tall is that? What kind of ceiling height are we talking about? What kind of modern technologies do I need to equip it with? And how much laydown space do I need?
Ooh.
And I want this leased tomorrow.
One tenant?
We could talk about it.
Okay.
I'm building this spec. You tell me what I'm building.
It's a good question. So first question is land, and you want it done quickly, right? You want it built quickly?
I got a year.
Okay. So I think what we do is work with companies like Harvey to design buildings, find locations, build the building, and then be their landlord. So we approach this from a long-term ownership standpoint and really try to dive in nuts and bolts and understand what the tenant's going to do. But the challenge that we're faced with right now, other than rates and construction pricing, which are both kind of getting better, is the lack of developable land. And of that land, what's easily permittable and what is permitted now to build. So I think your biggest question right there is where do you go? And there's not many options that are, DEP, have stormwater permits, have site location permits of something of that size, traffic permits. So you're probably looking, if you're in this area, you're probably in Gorham.
I want the dream product, not a product I know you have.
I'm not saying my site in Gorham. I'm just saying, shout out to Gorham. The approvals are very quick.
Josh has a site available in Gorham. If anyone's interested.
You could be in Auburn. I think you're looking at an area where you can get really quick approvals. So delegated review is important. So let's say you find a site that either has approvals or you have a municipality that can do quick approvals. I think you're building 30-foot minimum clear, 28 to 30.
And that's grown, right? I mean, I feel like 10 years ago we were doing 20, 25.
Yeah. I think you're minimum there. I don't think you'd want to build something shorter. You're probably looking at slab thickness for higher cubic square footage storage. So you got to keep that in mind, understand what the weights are going to be, and then more loading, because what a lot of buildings that we see that are legacy assets are limited in loading and circulation for trucks and laydown. They were built as manufacturing buildings, so they have low ceilings. They might have like 2 loading docks. So if you want to do 12 to 24 loading docks on something of, you're probably not 24 on a 50,000 square foot, but you're probably doing, 10 to 15 to be really aggressive if that's a one tenant building.
So are you using like a ratio of how many loading doors you want to have per square foot in that property?
I'm not good with math, so I don't.
Not necessary for developers.
No, I'm not a numbers guy. That's just more of a gut feeling based upon work with tenants that we've been working with. And But I'm sure there is a metric that you can use that would be more that would be appropriate for a more modern distribution. And they're not, these buildings aren't necessarily a distribution facility, so you don't want to overdo it with loading, but you need to have more loading than I think you could find in the market. And you're looking at power, high power, 480, 15. 3,000 amps. I don't know. You want to have a lot of capacity there. Gas would be great. Water, sewer. So you just want a facility that is probably not on the market and would be. We get a lot of interest from companies that are outside of this market looking to come in and want to be in 12 months. And then you add.
And they say Gorham.
They say Gorham, Saco, Portland. We're a little bit more Portland area focused, but I think I think Waterville has some awesome sites and a great city to work with. So really depending on where they want to be, but these buildings don't exist. But it takes 10 to 12 months for a building of that size to build it. So you can't add 6 months of approvals.
So Adam, you were on the hunt 36 months ago?
No. So we moved in to our facility.
I'll put a little picture up of Adam's new building.
I think it was August of 2020.
2020.
So we started the process taking a look at existing structures. So we are precision manufacturing. I think if you go forward in a slide, you'll see some of our CNC manufacturing. But we were looking for a very specific type of site that could support, as an existing facility, some of the CNC equipment. There we go. Yeah. And what you can see here is we do have some very specific structures. So the power, the air, but what's not noted in here is we do have a very complex oil distribution system that supports all that. So the availability of existing structure was very limited. So when we were looking, what was important to us was the kind of central location from our existing facility to that of our new facility.
And when you were on the hunt and were unable to find existing product, well, first I guess I'm curious, how long did you survey the existing market to see if something out there existed before you reached out to have something built?
So I think there was a couple different iterations, but we probably the second time, maybe about a year, looking at anywhere from the Gorham area where we were located, south to Scarborough, north to Yarmouth, just to see what some of the availability was. And I think we even went all the way up to Brunswick. But we really needed to settle for someplace a little bit closer to where we were calling home in Gorham.
So geographic location is important. Were you looking at some of these metrics that Josh is talking about, like loading doors and lay down space, ceiling height? Did any of that matter to you, or that really wasn't top of mind?
Well, I wouldn't say the laydown area, but no, when we were looking at it, it was power distribution. So we had to have the right power, gas for our facility, and then the access, again, for our facility for commute times. Those were the critical areas for us. One of the things that we know was important was the travel time from our current facility to our new facility, because what we couldn't jeopardize was the current talent that we had due to the hiring market that it is today.
I think that like working with Adam and understanding the importance of employee retention and recruitment, number one, for a facility that's really awesome to work in, with natural light, cleanliness, locker room, facilities, things, some of the stuff that if you were in the office presentation before that they were talking about, they incorporated that into this building. But, we're working with warehouse distribution companies, and even their kind of like lower wage hourly workers, they're concerned that if they move too far away, they're going to lose them. And then how do they find, consistent, trustworthy, happy employees and bring them in? So to your question about where you build a building, I think that's something that as a developer, I don't always think about when I'm in a vacuum and I'm looking at a site, but it's like, who's living around here? What's the employee base? Like what company can come here and then hire really close so that they don't have to drive 35, 45 minutes to get to the.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'm not a developer, not usually a fan of new construction because, I can't plan 24 months in advance and don't want to put more money down with the bank, and I don't want the time constraints and the supply chain, issues to deal with. So I prefer buying things that are already built. But as a guy who likes to buy industrial buildings that are already there, I've always thought a general good philosophy in buying industrial buildings after making sure that they qualify on some of these criterias is, especially in Maine, sort of interesting nuance, but if you track the major distribution routes in the state of Maine, I don't have a slide of the state, so you guys are going to have to use your local knowledge, but I-95, which goes Maine to Florida, you got 295, which probably most of us use to get around here, they intersect at Scarborough and in Gardner. So I've always thought those would be the general hubs where if I'm speculatively building something or just want to buy a vacant building and hope a tenant comes, I would want to be close to that because I think of supply chains and distribution. Do you find that this is a really stupid thought that Josh has, or is this like, some logic here?
There's definitely logic. We were comparing, so we're working with a tenant now where we're comparing Gorham site and our Saco site. And the difference in the diesel cost for their deliveries where they were it was more than $500,000 a year. So I think that I don't think it's as bad now as it was a couple of years ago, but I think that there are transportation costs that also come into factor. So depending on where their core customers are and where they're delivering, Gardner may be too far north, but I think it makes sense from a distribution standpoint.
And another thing I think about in buying buildings, just to make sure they're generic enough to accept tenants, you mentioned having a certain amount of loading doors for a certain size of property. I'm curious if you're finding a trend towards loading doors versus overhead doors. If I'm in this speculative building that I'm developing,
yeah.
Do I do a mix of both, or should I really be, focusing on more one or the other? And to you, Adam, in this building, I don't really see a whole lot of that. I mean, this is...
We didn't feature those in the photos.
Yeah. Are these all in the back?
Yeah.
So I think for manufacturing for us, we would always have to have a mixture of both. When we have large equipment that's being delivered, that's all on air ride trailers. So we need to have fork truck availability from the facility into the flatbed. So without that, it makes it challenging. So I would say, from my perspective, always need a combination of both.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think I would say there's a 80% loading dock and 20% drive-in is what we see generally, depending on the use. But I think the ability to get things in with forklifts, and then there's also the crane consideration that we've got at Harvey, and we've looked at for other buildings, so that big equipment can be lifted inside the building.
So we're here to discuss, based on what we've seen, COVID, post-COVID, 2023, 2024, trends that we've observed and how those trends are really going to affect the 2025 market. Is there any driving force that you've seen that's dictating your narrative for 2025 and how you're investing your money and how you've designed this space to make sure it's still useful over the next 5 years?
Well, I think there's going back to my original comment about land, there's a lack of supply for land. And there's a barrier to entry, right, with the approval process. And I don't see many municipalities loudly advocating for more industrial zone growth. It's not the housing shortage, so they don't really say about, hey, we're really short on industrial properties. We should have more industrial. Again, there are some exceptions to that. So if Justin were here, I think there's one thing that we might disagree a little bit about. I think his message in the industrial survey is that kind of rents are plateaued a little bit. And I think that that's generally the case, but there's a big difference in an existing facility rent and a new built-to-suit. And so when we talk to a lot of tenants who would, they have a need, they want to stay in Maine, they want to grow in Maine, they want to hire in Maine, they cannot find a building, so they have to look at built-to-suit. So when you're looking at built-to-suit, you're starting at these days 15, 16 triple net. I can't get 15 or 16 triple net on a 24-foot clear existing building I own. So we're down in the the 10, if I can get north of 10, I'm happy, right? So like there's a bifurcation in that market. And there may be a plateau in existing facilities because they attract a certain type of tenant. I think that those companies that want to grow because of the barriers to entry and the lack of supply on land, there's going to be growth in the build-to-suit market. So I guess I still feel pretty bullish about that. I think the unknowns are like cannabis, like, some of the overbuilding, over occupancy of that type of tenancy, like, is there going to be more vacancy in the legacy assets that we might be seeing that might drive those rents down?
So cannabis is an interesting subject. From my perspective, from a broker investor perspective, I'm seeing cannabis sites popping up left and right, and these sites are flooding the market with vacant spaces which have otherwise been occupied for the last 5, 6, 7 years.
In the industrial, like the grow spaces.
Yeah, specifically grows,
Yeah.
specifically grow operations. For some reason, the dispensaries, their retail stores seem to survive. Must be better margins than that. But almost that there's an oversupply of product in the state of Maine, and some of the smaller players are just folding. Do you predict that these spaces are going to get eaten quickly by the tenants who have been waiting for the last 5 years, or is this going to increase vacancy in the market?
I think my gut, and this is again, I'm not as detailed as some of the brokers here that looking at the numbers, but when I've looked at those spaces, that they're generally lower ceiling height, not very. They're more often than not like a retail industrial, like an old auto body shop or a transmission shop or a manufacturing building. And so you're looking at lower ceiling heights and limited loading. So I'm not sure that they're really the same type of tenant that if you were to go build this 50,000 square foot and cut it into 10, 5,000 square foot users with high bay, like different user. And I think more demand for the higher bay modern space than the lower. So I think it's going to be a vacancy, an add to the vacancy in the Class B industrial.
Did Adam, did you look at any of these repurposed cannabis spaces when you were looking around, or you just had such a specific product that you?
No, due to the size of our facility, we didn't look at any of that. We did look at other repurposed manufacturing spaces, but nothing that was in the cannabis well.
So, Josh, you talk about developing build-to-suits, building on spec. What is the largest barrier that a developer faces in that process?
The cost to build are most likely going to not economically be borne by the rent and the debt and equity. So tenants need to be prepared to contribute to the cost. Otherwise, I mean, we've worked with tenants who say rent is no object. We'll pay $25 triple net, and well, I say, well, that's not going to appraise. So we can't have that. Then we're kind of in an 80,000 square foot cannabis facility where the rent is way above market. So we're always trying to keep rents at market, and we don't have a problem pushing that if it's a really top level facility. So we're not afraid to kind of hit the upper range. But even with that, there's more likely than not in the construction costs or specialties or some of the more advanced fit out things that manufacturing companies need these days are going to say, hey, there's a pool of cost in this construction that really need to be borne by the tenant. You guys can take advantage of that from a depreciation standpoint. We're not we're not kind of getting over our skis and owning a building that's too specialized. We look at designing the building that could be 10 years, 15 years, whenever the lease is up, that we could then strip it back and have it be a more general distribution warehouse facility and make economic sense of the rents where we think they would be at that point. So I think that's a message for tenants as they're looking is like, it's, that's a reasonable ask from a landlord or developer to say you gotta contribute.
And I think that's what we did, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
So when you both are going through this process, and I know you guys start at different times, Adam, you're having these internal conversations at Harvey. We're looking in the market. We need some more space. We need some bigger space. Do any of these sites fit us? Do we need to go out and build a suit? At what point in the process did you get whoever it is, the decision makers, the C-suite, the locals, whoever is involved, at what point in that process are you saying, okay, let's build? And then from Josh's perspective, Josh, at what point, once Adam's made this decision, do you want to know so you can start your design and planning and get them through this process? And I'm imagining there's some managing of expectations. Josh, you're not saying I'm delivering this building in 6 months. Here's the process. What does this look like?
Yeah, so we started by looking again at existing structures, and that was myself and the prior VP. And it wasn't until we really found a piece of property which was located in Gorham that our C-level individuals really got involved. At that point, that's when Josh met, I guess it was our CFO at the time, to really take a look at, okay, what does that now mean from moving from a conceptual piece of property into the building? We had already started the thoughts and conversations with a site planner for some of the layout of our facility, more of an industrial engineer, but that's really the decision point for us, was securing the piece of property first and then finding, in this case, Josh, to continue the process.
And I think with Harvey and a lot of the tenants that we deal with, the ownership structures, kind of an interesting factor. I think in Maine, that we've had a lot of companies that have been like family owned and multi-generational. And when a company like that sells to a private equity fund, the philosophy of property ownership versus growth of the enterprise is kind of different, and they don't necessarily want to own the property; they want to lease back. And so, in Harvey's case, that was something that I think that you may, I don't know, early on maybe that was a consideration. We said, hey, we don't want to own it; we want to find a developer.
Correct. The kind of model for us is to be asset light. So out of the manufacturing locations, we actually only have a few that are true manufacturing locations. Everybody else may be slightly different business models. So the Gorham location is really the flagship for our organization in terms of manufacturing. We choose to be the experts in cutting tools, not necessarily that in the physical building.
Yeah, and like the amount of money that goes into a building could be better used to grow the business, and
Correct.
We see that more and more these days. So when they've made that decision, and I mean, in the case of Harvey and a couple others that we've worked with, they've said, "Here's the site we want to be in." That makes it a lot easier. We want to be on that piece of dirt, and then we can start running, sprinting to get approvals, design, and we'd like to be involved early in the design process so that we can kind of lend our opinion on best practices, means, and methods. But we also want to make sure the building is designed to what we want it long term after that tenant might leave. So I'd be more excited than being handed like, here's a building, we fully designed it, and it's really special, go build it for us. We might still consider it, but that we'd rather be upfront. I think we add value. So yeah, that's kind of.
But the timeline, I mean, when you're sitting down,
oh yeah,
planning this out.
So I think one of the things that they did, what we weren't involved in it, Justin was, I think actually helped you guys, but you did a sale leaseback of your existing facility that provided some flexibility.
That's correct. So the facilities that we were in, fraction of the size, correct. We worked with Justin here today to sell that back, lease that back. That would provide us a little bit of the flexibility that as we're building the facility, the new facility, it would provide a little bit of that gap in time, because we didn't know exactly when it was going to start or finish, and we couldn't have any type of disruptions to our manufacturing process.
Yeah, and we just did the package in Saco, and we had purchased their building to sale leaseback, so it was kind of common ownership. Gave them the flexibility, to deal with, and there was no lease cliff coming up where they were really in a bad place if the building didn't get delivered. And glad we did, because we had some delays with the approval process. But yeah, I think that's the timing piece is important, and it can take a long time to design a building depending on the complexity. Like a Harvey's a lot different.
What's a generic timeline? I mean, walk me through the process. You start the design phase, the entitlement phase, or site selection, then entitlement. Then you've got a construction period, stabilization. I mean, how long do these things typically take?
So I'll give you from when we started with you guys. So January of 18.
Yes.
January
Yep.
18. Okay. January of 18, we started the design process. The DEP permit, went in January. Got that 6 months later. Closed on the property in June. Started site work. Started construction in August, and finished the next August with COVID. So,
About 16 months. 20
20 months.
Math.
Yeah,
It was a pretty fast process.
But you know, but that was you know, with the financial support of Harvey, kind of saying, hey, we're going to take the risk on the design, we're going to take the risk on the approval piece, and we're going to, you know, press ahead so that we have everything teed up when the approvals are done. And you know, we went further than we probably would have if it was just us working with a tenant. We want to make sure the lease is done. We want to sure we understand the costs. But again, having a very clear understanding and open book process between us and the tenant, saying like, here, this is where we think we can cap out. Anything above that is going to be, you know, coming from you guys. Are you comfortable with that? Yes. Okay, let's go. Then that, you know, if the tenant's like, I can't contribute $1, or I have, you know, then the process slows down. So.
And you already had the land available that the tenant was willing to take, or did you have to go out and
They put it under contract and then
Oh.
assigned it to us.
you did the hard work?
They did the hard work.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did the work.
Yep.
So I was going to ask my next question. I'll still ask it, even though I'm not sure how relevant it is. But do you ever go out, maybe not for Harvey, but you on other projects, do you ever go out and survey the local municipalities to see who's anxious to have their industrial parks developed, and you know who's putting out incentives for general manufacturing and warehousing developments?
Probably not as I should probably spend more time doing that, but I think I kind of get a little bit of the flavor from just dealing on a project by project basis, talking to the different municipalities that we've talked to. You know, I think TIFs are important and are really helpful. We got one with Harvey. You know, we've gotten them on a lot of projects because there's a lot of kind of public infrastructure that does go in that helps. C-PACE financing, which is, we've not done a project yet, but we're working with a couple, and that's an opt-in by municipalities. I think most of the municipalities around here have done that, but that provides additional sources that are related to, you know, energy efficiency, but effectively it's a subordinate. Well, it's a not subordinate debt if you ask the bankers, right? But it's a little complicated, but it's an interesting tool that's been used in California for years. It's new to Maine, so that's one. But then you got the DRGO zones that are more tenant helpful in terms of capital investment. So I think looking at all of those things and trying to, you know, understand what the tenant wants and you know how it can help them versus help the landlord is important.
What's a DRGO zone?
Well, let's see. York, Cumberland, Sagadahoc, are they 5% of the capital investment that the company can claim over 5 years? And as a landlord, it doesn't go into my pocket, so it's less impactful for the landlord's financial side. But and there's also job incentives per employee if there's like job training or apprenticeships and things like that the company can get. Anywhere out of those counties, the rest of Maine, it's a 10% credit. So I think it's a pretty impactful financial benefit to some companies. And like in the opportunity zone, which we've done real estate development in opportunity zone, there's also benefit for operating companies to be in an opportunity zone. So trying to layer all those things is kind of fun.
Did you get in an opportunity zone?
No, we did not.
Oh.
No.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah. Tax increment financing. So you mentioned TIFs as a potential source of financing these projects. When do you decide in the development process, from either a business or a developer perspective, whether a project is deemed TIF worthy? Because if I'm building a 10,000 square foot warehouse for a tenant that's already in town moving down the road, I would think this isn't significant to the community. This isn't significant to municipality. Not going to waste my time.
I'd agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
But with Harvey, you guys are relocating, you're bringing jobs, you're bringing infrastructure.
They're staying in. I mean, in the case of you guys, you were staying and adding jobs, so it was a retention argument a little bit.
That's correct. Yeah, we were able to show the growth through the 5-year mark, and it was adding quite a few jobs to the local market. So it was very beneficial.
I think the thing with a TIF, and we've done them for historic projects and all a host, but as a developer, I don't take it for granted that when we go have those discussions, I know that it's more controversial in some cities and towns than it is in others. But it's a math equation, and if you can say, hey, in the case of Harvey, the TIF goes to them, so it's not coming to the landlord. It's helping offset, the tax burden directly for the tenant. In the case of other projects, it has been a credit enhancement agreement where we borrow against it, so it does help us. And I just try to be open book with the town and say, here's how, here we have a delta. We're having to add a ton of sidewalks or, improve the sewer that's going to help other people. And just think about the argument and be, good stewards of the money. But I think if you go in if you open with it and you haven't really got cost, it's probably a harder argument to make. But I found most are pretty reasonable if you show them why it's valid.
So, two-part question here. Adam, when you're looking at developing this new facility with Josh, are you surveying the market both locally and nationally to see what sort of modern industrial infrastructural items exist outside of the market that you want to bring back to Maine? And Josh, same question to you. When you're discovering, deciding what you want to build in this market, what sort of, this is a very legacy market, as we've talked about, a lot of existing industrial stock, a lot of old stock. What are you seeing that's out there in these larger markets that doesn't exist in Maine?
You go first.
Sure. So I think from our perspective, yes, we did take a look at what the industry held for the manufacturing space. One of the things we know is automation is going to continue to always be prevalent within manufacturing. Specifically with us, we're already running in a lights out environment. However, that is still dependent very much on current technologies and people. So we take a look at that. We know, I spoke of it a little bit earlier, but our oil distribution system was very much new for us. We had oil distribution, but not at the scope and scale that we had. A lot of conversations went into that, if you recall. And then, as we continue to add to our space, utilizing the footprint, vertical lift systems or cubic systems for storage will continue to be prevalent. So ensuring that we have the space today to continue our operations, but also with that forethought of when we do add robotics at some point, does our current infrastructure, aisleways between the equipment, between the walking spaces, kind of account for that new technology? And the way that our facility is set up today, it will account for all of that.
Yeah. I would say that we look, one of the things I look at is bigger market, Massachusetts, New Jersey, construction types are different. There's a lot more tilt-up concrete. That's not necessarily the right, method here in all cases, but like the Frito-Lay building down in Saco, that's what that was. And that was a time and cost advantage for that particular type of building. Wouldn't have worked for a Harvey, but that's an interesting thing. The height of the buildings takes into consideration, a lot of aspects of floor, super flat floors, and as I said earlier, thickness. Planning for some of the different equipment that's going to be doing picking and designing things for column spacing that might take into account narrower aisle widths because you're not having two people. It's more of an automated system. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from these bigger markets that just isn't in place here, which is kind of really interesting.
So I was Justin Lamontagne, the managing partner at the Dunham Group, was supposed to be on this panel with us. He unfortunately couldn't attend, and I was going to hammer him with this question, try and embarrass him in front of everybody. But with all of these special amenities and assets in these bigger markets, why should I invest in Maine at all? What benefit is there? And as we discussed, I'm in the process, our fund is in the process, and a couple of people in this crowd who are investors in our fund are in the process of buying a 70,000 square foot building in Savannah, Georgia, which is a very, very, there she is, very, very sophisticated market. I'm paying less per square foot for the building shown here than probably half per square foot for this building to what you're building in Maine. Why should I put a dime in
You're
Maine?
parking constrained.
You're right. We need more room.
No, it's a good question. I mean, when you look at like Southern industrial and try to compare it to us, it doesn't make sense. But there are companies that are Maine-based that are needing and wanting to grow, and as I said before, are not necessarily price sensitive. So they're strong companies or growing companies. They might be, private equity held and growing to be someday a public company. And I think the barrier to entry is high, but not so high that it's not worth doing.
I'm saying lower barrier to entry here.
No, but I'm saying why do it here?
Oh, okay.
Because you can't come in. I mean, so I think that like the other thing you and I have talked about is, some of the smaller, cheaper metal buildings that you can build. Maybe that's an opportunity if you can get comfortable with that manufacturer and do things for cheaper. And so you can kind of undercut the market and provide a newer product. But there's certainly not an oversupply issue here. And and even if you look at the total industrial market as a whole, you're looking at legacy, not the same stuff that we're talking about with new. So it's I think it's not everyone should dive in because then there's less projects for me to do. So
or if I get more of them to do more projects in South, you'll have more projects
there you
available
go.
here.
But I think it's I feel bullish on it.
Okay.
Yep.
It's not as fun without Justin here, but
No.
so. Kit buildings. Let's talk about kit buildings for a second. I was chatting with the folks earlier at Patco. If anybody's in the room, shout out.
Patco built our Saco. They were great.
Oh, look at that. Yeah. So Patco does a large amount of industrial construction in the area, and I approached the guys downstairs about 2 hours ago, and I said, hey, I get these solicitations from, I think it's called American Steel, Iron Works, Incorporated. There are these organizations that are out there pitching these prefab kit buildings that are smaller. I haven't seen anything over 20,000, 30,000 square feet yet. Generally, they're targeting 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. But they're saying, hey, this is a prefab building assembled on site. We will sell you all the materials. We will have it there in 1 week. All you have to do is assemble it and bring in your MEPs, plumbing, heating, etc. And it's $65 a square foot. You don't have to give me the exact numbers on Harvey, but in general, what are you underwriting today to build a new construction industrial in this market?
I mean, you're
3 times? 2.5 times that?
2.5 times, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we've had this discussion. I mean, I think there might be the right fit for the kit building. It's not it's not certainly not a Harvey. I don't know if it's.
I mean, it looks like that though.
Yeah,
that's a metal. It's not a kit building because it was built in 1974, but that's a metal siding, steel interior, metal roof. That you could rebuild that nicer today with kit infrastructure cheaper.
The hesitation I have, and I could be proven wrong, but let's say the legacy Butler buildings or buildings that were built in the 90s that were pre-engineered metal buildings, right? So it's a step up, I think, from that, but engineered to meet the standards, but not much more in terms of wind shear and snow load and ability to. So when you get down the road, the building could become a little less able to change. So I'm not unsold on the kit building, but it seems intriguing. But I'm also so sensitive to the tenants' needs and looking at owning something for 10 to 15 years. Like it would take a while to get comfortable for me.
So clock just hit 10 minutes. I'm supposed to open up for questions. If there are any questions, please approach the microphone, and if no one has any questions, we'll just keep talking. Thank you, Brandon. Somebody give that guy a hand up.
No, I love industrial buildings, and like you said, we have a bunch of old infrastructure around here. Hopefully, at some point, we can maybe get some newer, larger, bigger ones. But what are you guys seeing for like ceiling heights now and in the future? Like, Josh, what do you look like? Cubic square footage, I know it's a big thing, but just kind of wondering what if you were to looking forward to build a new building, are you 20 feet? Are you 30? Are you thinking 40?
I think you're 30 minimum, and I don't. I think that if you're in a bigger market, you're even higher, or freezer buildings, where they're really stacking, and it is really a cubic square footage thing. I'm not sure that we have the demand from the distribution standpoint here to justify that, but it could be. I mean, and again, you're probably not going to go wrong building higher, but it's just a cost benefit equation at that point. But I don't think I'd want to do it if it was, less than 24 feet, but closer to 30.
Does that answer your question?
That answered it.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
All right. Well, if anyone else has a question, we'll just keep talking. But you guys have 8 minutes to step up. Oh, question in the back. Oh,
Oh, we have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. This
We
clock's
started that
at 8.
late.
What the heck?
So Josh, what are you seeing right? I mean, I guess the environment with, not to get political, and I don't, I think it's more as a bystander of.
Always good to get political. With
Yeah, 3 minutes to go. Here we go. With the potential for tariffs, the clawback of federal funding, I'm seeing it's like a weird combination of optimism and growth in some sense, but then also hey, what do we do? I got an email this morning from a New Jersey broker, and this was a New Jersey specific need, but it was we have a 60 to 90,000 square foot manufacturing company who needs space in 90 days to onshore manufacturing. Wow. Now, does that actually hold if the tariffs? I mean, what's the long-term effect of that, and will we see that? What's the effect of Adam seeing raw material prices and from tariffs? So I think I think there's a lot of unknowns. But what are you seeing, Adam? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing the tariffs, or at least the fear of the tariffs. So one of the things that we've done to prevent and to ensure that we have a stable product and stable pricing for our end users to buy ahead. So that's our best bet right now, is we've bought ahead in terms of months of material. So if the tariffs go up, or more important for us is the availability of material, we always need to ensure that if we have material, that our customers can continue to operate. I think what's unique about us is 98% on time and delivery for us. So everything that we have is in the catalog at time. So having any disruption in terms of material availability is critical for us. And then again, buffering that with buy ahead to manage the tariff price hikes.
Yeah, I like that question, Josh. Fear of tariffs. Is anybody from Bangor Savings Bank in the room? No hands, or just fear of hands? Bangor Savings Bank in the back. So Bangor Savings Bank generously is financing this beautiful building you see before you with no parking issues whatsoever. I get the craziest question from Bangor Savings Bank Loan Committee during the acquisition. If you know what I'm about to tell the story, don't say anything. Dale Winchenbach, I've always been confused about that, but he's the lender for this property, and he was generously willing to travel with us as a loyal Bangor Savings Bank client to go all the way down to Savannah, Georgia, and do this deal. And I didn't get the typical round of questions what's the strength of the tenant? What's the ceiling height? No one asked me a single financial metric, but I did get this question. Josh, the bank is really concerned about tariffs. We're concerned about financing this project because this tenant is a auto exporter. They send their cars. It's actually M&E Baltic is the name of the tenant, and they take the cars that you guys all total and salvage and get into crashes. They empty all the liquids and fluids. They drop the cars here, and these guys ship the cars to the Baltics where they're driving your secondhand cars around. And the bank says, well, we're concerned when Uncle Donnie puts these tariffs down. Is this even in business? Are these guys even going to be able to ship their cars? And I'm like, I'm a commercial real estate guy in Portland, Maine. You want me to answer a question to you on the state of global geopolitical tariff economic warfare? I have no idea. But I said, I'll take a stab at it if that makes the bank feel more comfortable about giving me money for this project. Inevitably, they said, you know what, we'll give them money anyway. But I had never heard a question like that in my life. Had absolutely nothing to do with the real estate and everything to do with the political scene.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah. My argument to them was,
We're at 0 minutes.
Yeah, okay, we're good. Let's give a louder round of applause for these guys than those guys.
Thank you, guys.